Today we're going to be covering what I feel are the 11 best John Ford films from worst to best. I'm Foxy Cellars. I'm enthusiastic about storytelling. If you fancy fables, fiction, tall tales, and high adventure, you've come to the right channel. If you would, click subscribe. You'll get keyed into videos just like this in the future, and you'll get to see more of what I produce. A while back, I produced a video that was my top 10 directors of all times, and John Ford was very high on that list. And so there's a lot of his movies that I'm extremely enthusiastic about talking about. So I'd like to kind of dig into some of those. Let's get started. Number 11, The Last Hurrah. And Spielberg's gone on and on about Spencer Tracy being the greatest actor of all times. And I don't want to say I don't get it, because every time I see him, he blows my mind. I'm like, he's solid. He usually demands a lot of dignity, respect, whatnot for his presence on screen. However, I'm not that huge of a fan of him, but I do recognize that every time I see him, I'm like, he's carrying this scene. So this one isn't necessarily one of my favorite John Ford movies. It's on the list because it's a really solid movie. Some of the others that I'm more of a fan of, but this movie's maybe a better movie, and I'm going to use this moment to do, I guess, my honorable mentions. But I'd say Drums Along the Mohawk, should make some people's list. It should make my list, but The Last Hurrah was a better movie, so it bumped it off. Rio Grande's one. A lot of people love that movie. I love that one. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon is also one and that's one of the ones that'll have solid music and themes and whatnot in it. And it's probably one of his more traditional movies. And then The Three Godfathers, which has, the three characters kind of arguing it out as they're going along and fighting over how to take care of this baby that they've discovered, and they're now the godfathers of. But with The Last Hurrah, this deviates a little bit for what's typical of John Ford. But this one's more of a political drama, and it is dramatic. So, it does have a heartfelt moments like every John Ford movie. But this one is more dramatic, and it follows Spencer Tracy, who's like an aging mayor, and he's seeking re-election, and it delves into the intricacies of the political world. And your typical politician, you've got your politicians that everybody thinks is scumbag, and then you got your politicians that are they're doing their job, but they kind of still play the game. This is one of those this is of a time when there were political figures that had a high level of morality, and you look at the figure that Spencer Tracy is playing, and you're like, this is a guy I have a lot of respect for. Number 10, My Darling Clementine, which is, of course, another poetic retelling of the Wyatt Earp story, legend, what have you. This one is noted specifically for its cinematography, and it has got a bit of a character depth for the typical characters that show up in the Wyatt Earp stories. But this one has some shots that are really great. It does have you've got Henry Fonda doing his whistling here and there, and it adds the typical musical essence to it. It had the title song, My Darling Clementine. It functions almost like a refrain, but it's romantic, of course. And the spare score, it's contrasted with church hymns and saloon tunes. It builds this sense of placement into the scenery of where you are. Of course, what the story of Wyatt Earp and the OK Corral and all the good stuff. Number 9 is Fort Apache. Fort Apache does have one of those typical John Ford Western feels to it, with the cavalry and the battle, the battles that they have or whatnot. And even though it falls into that typical category, I find this to be possibly the best of one of those, if that makes sense. And this is what's considered the first installment. He had what was called the Cavalry Trilogy. So this is the first installment in it. And it's a nuanced portrayal of the military life and the leadership of, the cavalry, as it were, at that time. This is also a great example of the landscapes that he would frame, and his unparalleled skill at doing that. I mean, especially at the the wide screens and the deep focuses. It's as if he was a painter. I mean, it's just the composition on these is always spectacular. Fort Apache, it's got this martial music and military bugle call it totally sets the tone and the pace for it. But he's got like folk tunes that are kind of mixed in that humanize the soldiers, especially for the time. And it's a simple time, but it's also like just a horrific time that everybody's kind of forced into. And it gives you this humanized simplicity to these soldiers. And then it adds texture to the film's exploration of I guess I would say like the hierarchy of the ranks within, the soldiers, as well as like, what the level of sacrifice that they had to give. I believe John Ford to be one of the greatest in composition, and he has this excellent way of quietly telling you some stories. There's things that just don't need to be said, and I think that's brilliant in script writing when things are sometimes obvious and you don't need to pander to the audience. So present it in a way that this is what would happen in real life, and they don't sit there and tell you everything step by step to what happened. And he was always very good about that. He also subtly includes music in a way that it drives the story forward. However, when people watch it, they don't think of his movies as a musical, but music is so heavily threaded throughout his movies. Number 8 is Mr. Lincoln. This is one, you give it some time, and if you go back and watch this every so often, there is some very great character depth here. Bear in mind, this is the age when Lincoln was not Lincoln yet. He was working his way up the legal vines at the time, in the area that he was in. And it shows you a lot about his character before he went through the things that he went through, of course. And everybody knows the story of, President Lincoln. And in all fairness, I mean, this one it's a biography, but it's a compelling snapshot in time for drama and it features Henry Fonda. You got to love anytime Henry Fonda's in any movie, but B, when he's in and he wasn't in a ton of John Ford's movies, but when he is, he's really a pinnacle figure. Number 7 is How Green Was My Valley, which is I believe the only movie to win Best Picture for John Ford, but his films were nominated 7 times. So it's like, he's getting the second to highest accolade 7 times. I mean, he won it once. This one's a great movie. It's not clear. I mean, it's number 7 on my list, so it's not the best. There's others that I think should have won Best Picture against what it went up against, but this one, holds its own. And it's got a sweetness to it that's through and through, wholesome, I should say, would probably be the best word to describe it, through and through. And I can see this winning Best Picture for the time. He also, and I'll point this out now, he won the Academy Award for Best Director 4 times. And I think that stands. I don't think Spielberg's beaten that, and Hitchcock never won it. And yeah, I think he holds the record for that, which is very impressive. The movie's an emotional, family saga. Yeah. So it's a family saga that, kind of these characters go through what they go through, and it's got, tragedy within the family. I don't want to give anything away because I really think this is one of those movies everybody should see. And do keep in mind, so when this won Best Picture, it beat Citizen Kane. So it was solid enough at the time to beat what ended up becoming, some people consider Citizen Kane one of the greatest films of all times, if not the greatest film of all times. I don't, but How Green Was My Valley is surpassed it, and it was recognized for it at the time. And I'll add, this one is another musical one. He does this thing with, this is one of those films that has a lot more higher level female characters in it than some of his others, because most of them are military Western and whatnot, and they always have like the key or two key characters that are female. This one has a little bit more of that. And, there's the deep humanity and complexity to all of his characters in all of his films. He has this, there's always honor to it, but like the family, like the family adhesiveness is definitely first and foremost here. And so musically, like, it always played an important part. It was, I want to say, quietly powerful and often underappreciated for what was always present in John Ford's films. And it shaped like the emotion. It always would deepen the characters. The biggest thing was it would enrich, I guess, the cultural atmosphere for each of the stories, which, they didn't vary all that much. They were either military or they were political or they were, Irish. And the thing was, Ford loved Irish music and he was deeply obsessed with it. And he's noted as singing and whistling ballads, Irish ballads on set for films all the time. So even if you don't pay attention to it too much and you notice that his films aren't that musical, they are, of course, he was just innately a musical person. And I don't know if he had like musical skills, but he just was always whistling a tune and it was just kind of his thing. And he intentionally used it as a driving force for all of his films, especially with pushing the narrative in the direction that he needed it to go. He would always choose music that had like musical memory to it. So, and what I mean by that is there a lot of times little catchy things that you can't forget. They're like stuck in your head. A lot of times it was for dramatic effect, especially the cavalry type musicals and the bugles that he used. That was always like, and I know that doesn't relate to How Green Was Your Valley because this was more of the Irish sentiment, but I'm noting this specifically for the Westerns and the soldier films, of course. Number 6 is Stagecoach. And this one's a very important film. But the thing is, John Ford, he was one of the most influential for so many of the great directors. Spielberg was my number one on the list, but John Ford was probably one of his most influential directors that came before him, not to mention like Akira Kurosawa. Akira Kurosawa was heavily influenced by John Ford. So all of these, art is just one of these influencing cycles. It just goes round and round and round, and people are copying and recreating off of things and making them their own. And so many directors who have now made something of their own, the seeds came from John Ford. One of the most notable things about Stagecoach is if you've seen the scene where they're sliding underneath the stagecoach. In the first Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's climbing underneath the truck. That is a reenactment of the scene from Stagecoach. So Stagecoach was the one that was probably the most influential for all these directors to come. And I mentioned Spielberg and Akira Kurosawa, but Martin Scorsese was hugely influenced by him, as well as Orson Welles, took a lot from what he was doing, and George Lucas, of course. But Stagecoach is one, like, for those of you, a lot of you have probably seen it, go back and watch it again. It's one of those ones where you can rewatch it every couple of years, and it's pure. It is such a great way to describe it in its storytelling. Notably, too, this is what propelled John Wayne. John Wayne, I don't know if he had done a movie before. I think this might have been the first movie he did with him, but this is pretty much what propelled him into stardom. And it's celebrated as one of the most innovative storytelling events, especially for Westerns of its time. It was nominated for Best Picture. It actually had 7 nominations and it won 2 Oscars. In one of them was Best Supporting Actor by Thomas Mitchell. And Thomas Mitchell showed up in a lot of his films, and he was great. Number 5 is Sergeant Rutledge. And I'm so glad to have this deep on the list too, because this is one where I don't think a lot of people are aware of the greatness of this film. And it's ahead of its time as far as, dealing with race and dealing with, the minority within the group. It's a courtroom drama, and it addresses the racial injustices that would have happened at that time within the cavalry. It stars Woody Strode, who you will recognize if you're familiar with John Ford movies. He does show up in a handful of his movies, but this is one, and he's got a stoicness to him. He doesn't say too much, but when he speaks with confidence and dignity, and he comes off as somebody where there's honor and you believe him, even though, because of his race, he's kind of thrown into the ringer. And but it does have this back and forth, and I love it in the sense that's like very similar to like Rashomon, the Akira Kurosawa, where they're doing a retelling of things in the courtroom that are flashbacks to things that are relevant to the case itself. Number 4 is Mr. Roberts, and this is another one that kind of falls into the same category where people might not know about this one, and I have it high on my list regardless. This one is more comedic than any of the others.
Doc, will you tell him what you were telling me last night about how stupid he is?
Yes, Doc. Maybe you'd like to tell me to my face.
Yes, I would. You are stupid, Doug, and I can prove it.
I'm surprised he didn't do more movies like this, because it does follow. It's like it's a naval story, and it's got Henry Fonda's in it, and Jack Lemmon is the comedic relief. And I'm curious, like, I would love to find out a little bit more about this aspect, but there's a lot of scenes that are filmed with Jack Lemmon separately, and all the scenes with like the crew, and they have the bigger groups. Jack Lemmon's not in any of them, and it's kind of weird. I always thought that was kind of weird. I'm like, wouldn't he be there with them? And I always wondered if it was like something where like they filmed it later, or like they made a change to the script and they just placed him in all these places, or they made a change to the script and he was no longer in it, so they only had like the intimate scenes with him in it, none with the cast. So I was always curious about that, but he's hilarious in it, and if I recall, this might be one of his first big roles. He might not have been this, household name yet to that point. But it is probably the funniest movie that I have on this list. There's a lot of antics, if you will. And I think a lot of that might have to have done with the fact that Ford was replaced as the director later on and I don't know the details behind that, but he didn't complete the movie, so it might have something to do with that. Okay, number 3, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. These are 3 top-tier films for any director. The Searchers, and this is widely regarded as Ford's masterpiece. And this is on numerous films lists. If you go on like AFI's greatest lists, they have different types of greatest of this and greatest of that. So like their greatest Westerns, it's on AFI's list for that. It's on their list of top sight and sound movies. And it's on like a lot of people's lists. I just recently saw a couple of clips where like Quentin Tarantino talked about it, and it was one of those movies where he never really liked it, and it got kind of jammed down his throat, and he recently went back and watched it, and he's like, I actually get it. And it's notable for its cinematography, specifically for because it's got some of these shots that are unbelievable. And keep in mind, so John Ford had directed 140 films, 5 decades worth of work. This was, as far back as the silent films, movies like The Iron Horse. And then, he did documentaries that were related to World War II. He stopped working in Hollywood, and he actually enlisted in the Army. And what he was doing in the Army was he was directing films for, recruitment, which, it's as if he was bringing in, for John Ford to come in, he was bringing in thousands of other people just because of the work that he did. So there's a lot of credit due there. But he's got a catalog that's just massive. So keep in mind, like, this is 1956 that he did The Searchers. This isn't one of his like early movies. He's mastered it by this point. Not only has he mastered it, he was the master of visual storytelling. And this is one of those prime examples too, where like, he always, the composition of it was like these landscapes that This is what people romanticized about America when they'd watch these John Ford movies, and they'd see a part of America that they hadn't seen, and they're seeing it from kind of the lens that was 100 years ago. So people romanticized about it. They thought that this was America. This was the heart. Like, he's the Norman Rockwell of Westerns in that sense. And he did find this way to perfectly frame the desert, or these sceneries in the West. Specifically, like Monument Valley was something that he transformed into like these natural landscapes, and they had this mythic American backdrop for him. And notably, and I believe Searchers is probably the best example of this, is he preferred showing you what was going on instead of like this dialogue or speech, or he didn't waste time with bullshit. He just would he would be subtle, and he'd use silence sometimes a gesture was all he needed. It's complex, the method that he would apply, even though it was simplistic in its final format. And keep in mind, like, so Searchers, Stagecoach, I mean, these are like the archetypes that shaped how Westerns are still made and interpreted. Like, I don't know as much today, but for like, come late 70s, early 80s, that this was the archetype of Western films. Number 2 is The Man That Shot Liberty Valance. I believe this to be the second greatest Western of all times. And this is one of those ones where, I don't know how many times I've heard these marquee directors cite this film and go back and watch it and talk about it. And I mean, the character that John Wayne plays in it is extremely interesting, because he really is this like silent bodyguard to Jimmy Stewart in a way that is this character type that I don't want to say didn't exist before that, but it was so well used at this point. And like more so with some of the cavalry films, but like his characters, and they're deeper than sometimes they're fleshed out to be, but like that, he usually would pick an actor that you could see through. Their transparency and the texture of them was so deep. But these characters seem to always grapple with honor, duty, regret, the morality, the ambiguity of morality too, because, especially like with Searchers, there's definitely a dark side to the morality that one side is chosen. But with this too, like you're dealing with two different types of characters in Jimmy Stewart's character and John Wayne's character, and they both have a level of morality, but they follow different bylaws. And then you got Lee Marvin's character, Liberty Valance, who's, I'm trying to think back. I mean, at the time, this would be considered one of the great villains of all times. And he's one of the rare villains that doesn't have justification to him. He's just a douchebag. So it's hard, that type of a character needs to be done well if you're going to do it. Usually they give justification, reason, and some sort of a backstory as to why. They don't do that with this character, and it works fine. He's more of a traditional old school villain that works great, and there's a mystery behind him too. But the really great thing that they focus on isn't the mystery of him; it's the mystery of how he died. And, across the board, there's not a lot of people shedding a tear for this dude, because he, like I said, he's a douchebag. He died, but like, what's the story behind, like, who killed him? How'd he get killed? Let's retell that story in a flashback. And that's what the whole movie is. It's a flashback.
You heard him, dude. Pick it up.
No, Pilgrim, hold it. I said you, Valance. You pick it up.
3 against 1, Donovan.
My boy Pompey. The kitchen door.
I'll get it, Liberty.
I said you, Liberty. You pick it up.
everybody in this country killed crazy? Here! There! There! Now! It's picked up!
It's one of the greatest Westerns of all times. By all means, like, if you're one of these people watching this video right now and you've not seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, like, get on it, man, because this is one of the greatest films of all times. And then my number one favorite John Ford movie of all times is The Quiet Man. I watch The Quiet Man all the time. I mean, I use the phrase it's rewatchable, but like, this is more than rewatchable. This is like a bowl of ice cream and your favorite beer, or like, you know, your nice cozy spot. Like, this is something you're going to want to go back to over and over again. John Ford he wasn't born in Ireland, but he comes from Irish heritage, and he loved Ireland, and he would go back to Ireland all the time. And he had this, fascination with the culture of Ireland. So this was the love letter to his heritage and the culture that he was so fascinated by. And it does pick on Irish culture, but it's self-deprecating in the way that, like, if you're flawed and you want to make fun of yourself, it's fine. And that's kind of what's going on here. He's making fun of himself as if, like, this is a culture that I believe in. Here's how hilarious and ridiculous it is. And so, like, he celebrated tradition. He celebrated ceremony too. Like how Greenwood Your Valley is more of like a family bonding thing. And this is similar, but this one's more of a community. And it really does. So here's the thing. It is this romantic drama set in Ireland, and it showcases for its versatility. And this did earn him a Best Director Oscar win, not just a nomination, but a win. And it follows John Wayne's character, who was this boxer from, I believe, Massachusetts. And he ends up, going back to his childhood home where he didn't grow up, but he was like an infant or whatnot, was raised in the United States. And he comes back and he is so alien to this culture of Ireland. He falls in love with Maureen O'Hara. I love Maureen O'Hara. I love every movie she's in. And she did do a bunch of John Ford's movies. I may or may not have mentioned her earlier. Is the most comedic of all the films on this list, with the exception of Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts is by far the biggest comedy. This one just integrates everything. This is the most complete whole film. If you want to think about all the things that are applied to it, whether it be musical or the character development or because he goes through this dating process with her where he has to court her and he has to follow the rules of courting. He can't just jump her whenever he wants, like an American might. Like, he has to kind of follow along, and they've got a chaperone. Oh, and Barry Fitzgerald, he shows up in tons of different movies, and he's in a couple of John Ford movies. Every time this guy shows up, he's one of the unsung character actors of all times. He really is. I mean, he's got that thick Irish accent, so of course he's perfect for it. And he's got that line I love in it where, someone asks him if he wants whiskey with some ice in it, and he's like, I don't want ice in it. And they're like, when I drink whiskey, I drink whiskey. When I drink water, I drink water. I don't mix. Queensbury rules will be obscured. It is so. He was nominated. And to keep in mind, so this is a rich Irish traditional musical, and it's got ballads, and it's got a fantastic film score by Victor Young. It weaves seamlessly through song and dance, and the fighting in the end. That's one of the best things about it. Is there's this big fight at the end that just goes back and forth, and there's almost this Caddyshack feel to it, where all of the people in the village are kind of betting on the side and excited, and they're following them. It was like a scene from Family Guy where the chicken and Peter are fighting, just they roll from town to town, and it just keeps going on and on and on. This is iconic in the sense that it's just it's a bit ridiculous. And the fight occurs because of what's going on with these traditions that they have to follow. And there's cheap shots. They stop to have beer in a pub. It's just bananas, but it's so fun. It's so happy. There's so much love and musical tradition to it that I can't not watch this movie, but maybe like every year and a half, year or so. And by God, if you have not seen The Quiet Man, go on Just Watch the app or, online and look to see like, where can I see The Quiet Man? And it'll tell you like, oh, it's on Amazon, it's on Vudu, they happen to have it on Apple or whatever. I'm making this shit up. So don't go to those places first. Just films of all times. It's in my top 20 and it's my number one John Ford film. I want to thank you for watching. John Ford is one of my favorite directors, and if he's one of your favorite directors, you probably enjoyed some of these little tidbits. Go ahead, subscribe to my video. You get to see more of what I produce. And if you would comment too, like you might have a difference in opinion of some of the things that we talked about. You might even be like, what? That's the best movie? Bullshit. No, this is the best movie. And I'm sure I'm going to hear from you guys like, why didn't you include such and such? Wasn't one of my top 11 movies. So there you go. There's your platform to do so. Again, I'm Foxy Cellars, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future and you watching my next video.